The UN's World Food Programme says it'll start airlifting food aid into Mogadishu within days. The global body is at the same time appealing for an extra $500 million to feed the starving people in the Horn of Africa. This is just a day after it declared famine in some of the regions in that area. A crisis meeting on funding is set to take place next week. Aid agencies say the international community needs to do more and fast. The charity Oxfam says the aid bill so far could be double the UN's estimate, as high as $1 billion. But so far, only about 20% of the needed money has been raised. The top donors have been Britain, the United States and Australia. But Oxfam has directly accused several rich nations of what it calls willful neglect. It's singled out France, Italy and Denmark for a special criticism. Now, we have reporters across the region covering this developing crisis. In a moment, we'll hear from Catherine Soy, who's in Turkana in northern Kenya. First, though, the latest from Peter Greste at the Dolo Ado camp in Ethiopia. That's right now home to more than 100,000 Somali refugees.
Imagine what Somalia must be like for Dolo Ado to be worth walking 2 weeks through the desert to get to. Hot, dusty and inhospitable, the camp hardly counts as relief for the 100,000 or so refugees who've settled here in desperation. But the UN and a handful of other aid agencies are slowly getting help out. The transit camp is where the UN does most of the processing work. Here refugees are logged and provisioned, but it is a chaotic process. Administrators say they are catching up with the backlog, but there are 11,000 people in the transit centre alone, and it takes more time than some of these people have. At least some of the infrastructure is working. The UN has managed to get water treatment plants in place and clean supplies into the camps. That at least is some relief.
The UNHCR is doing its best to bring in food and medical supplies that it needs to help the people here, but time and again those that we spoke to complain that they're simply not getting the food or the medical help that they need to survive this crisis. People here are dying in great numbers.
Isaac Aiden is terrified that his children will be added to the statistics. He, his wife and their 3 daughters trekked across the desert from Ufro deep inside Somalia. The tent isn't theirs, nor the crude shelters behind them. All they own, he tells me, is the sheet of plastic they're sitting on, the clothes they wear, and their lives. Even that is not guaranteed. The doctors gave us some medicine for the children, he tells me, but we still don't have enough to eat, and they can't afford to buy any. I'm very worried about them. The World Food Programme says it is now working on opening up land and air routes for food supplies into Somalia itself, so that people don't have to make the journey here. In the meantime, the authorities are getting ready to accept 100,000 more Somalis who can't wait until then. Peter Greste, Al Jazeera in the Dolo Ado camp in eastern Ethiopia.
Many Turkanas live in villages such as this deep in the countryside, where there are no roads or no hospitals, and where the drought has had the biggest impact. Take this family, for example. It relies on food aid, which is irregular, and when that runs out, it's extreme measures. They resort to eating such wild fruits.
Life is very hard for us. Our animals are dead, and now we just wait for our death, she says.
Families now have to rely on their children to look for this wild fruit. The children walk long distances looking for it, yet they are the most vulnerable. Malnutrition rates in Turkana are the highest they've been in 20 years. It hasn't rained here for a year now, and you can see how dry and desolate it is. The people of Turkana solely depend on their livestock, but with their animals dying and human deaths as well, many now fear for the worst.